Film never lies, and it revealed the brutal truths about this defense. While there was some progress on the offensive side of the ball, we'll talk about all the film takeaways in today's episode from that Monday night disaster against the Commanders.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow, along with your host, James Rapien, and today's guest, Mike Santagata, at Bengals_Sands on Twitter. You can find him on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Our regular film breakdown guest here in season on Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, on YouTube, and everywhere you get your podcast. Welcome back to the Everydayers, and those of you who make us your first listen, looking for answers after a debacle on Monday Night Football that moves the Bengals to 0-3. And if you're looking for tickets, this episode is sponsored by Gametime, who has an offer for you to save $20 off your first purchase of tickets with promo code LOCKEDONNFL in the Gametime app. Guys, we're going to start on the defensive side of the ball because how could you start elsewhere? As much as we would like to talk about some of the progress we may have seen from the offense in this game, as both of the defenses were about as bad as NFL defenses can be. One was meant to be a playoff team, and one was meant to be a rebuilding team in year one with a rookie quarterback and a new head coach. And unfortunately, the one that's the farthest away from expectations at this point is the Cincinnati Bengals. And Mike, I sat up here on this show after the game last night and was pointing fingers at the defensive line. After watching the tape, nothing really went right on this defense overall. That's only a slight hyperbole, but where would you say the foundational issue is right now for this defense?
Yeah, you probably didn't point enough fingers at the defensive line because the time to throw for Jayden Daniels is insane. The time it takes for them to get pressure, the time it took for them to get pressure in this game, I think almost every throw felt like it was either over 2.5 seconds to throw, which is about what you look at for a pressure being meaningful. But if it wasn't, it's not like he was pressured on throws that were under 2.5 seconds either. There was a play of quick game. It was 3 slants on the left side, going to the right side. And I only ever really see them hit the second window. You got that first window right in front of the linebacker. It's quick game. You get the ball, set your feet, throw it. Jayden Daniels had time to get the ball, set his feet, wait for the guy to go past the middle linebacker to the next side, to the other side linebacker, and throw it. And I was like, I only see that in Madden because they don't make you play like a real NFL quarterback. Like you get 4 seconds to throw the ball in a video game. You don't normally in the NFL. So I don't see that window thrown very often, but that's the type of day it was. There's a lot of it was doubling Trey Hendrickson, but to be honest, he made good on one of his one-on-ones for sure. And other than that, he had some opportunities and he didn't dominate like he did the past 2 weeks. So you can even point a little bit of a finger there, just like, if you're talked about as a top 4, top 5 pass rusher, and you're going against a rookie who's struggled and a journeyman vet splitting time, you probably should win that matchup more often than you did. But the real issue to me is, I don't know what you do roster construction wise at this point because it's so late, but would Carlos Dunlap be the second best pass rusher on the team at 35 years old after not playing for a season? Maybe. Look at what they've been. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the scary part here, and obviously you hope Myles Murphy can come back after week 4, will be eligible week 5, and give you a boost. But Sam Hubbard and Joseph Osai, just both running with weighted shoes on, it felt like. Neither guy is doing what you need them to do. Osai with Daniels in space a couple of times, just looking rough, looking like he's 35 years old and hasn't played in a year. And that isn't it, right? He's this young contract year guy that you were hoping would take a step forward and make an impact. Let's talk about those two guys, the other ends. And look, by the way, you're right about Trey Hendrickson. Just because he was awesome last week, it would have been nice if Jayden could have felt him a bit more, especially early in this game when he was getting super comfortable and getting into a rhythm. But specifically, with Joseph Osai, number 58, Sam Hubbard, number 94. Did you notice them, or were they just as unimpactful as it felt like in real time?
Joseph Osai was probably the second best pass rusher in the game, but it's really not saying that much. It was some late wins. There was some around the pocket at 10, 11 yards, but Jayden Daniels, I mean, he could step up to 5 yards if he wanted to because there was no push on the interior. And he was worse as a run defender, though. Like, as bad as you think of what the pass rush might have been, the run defense was terrible from him in this game. It kind of pointed to like, oh, maybe this is what the coaching staff saw. Sam Hubbard, kind of the opposite end, where the run defense, when you go back and watch, it was better than you might think. Like, he made some stops. He was a key cog in a couple of plays where they were able to actually stop the run. And stopping the run, actually, it went better than I remembered, at least. When I went back and watched, I was like, oh, yeah, they did get some stops. It wasn't just nonstop 7 yards, 7 yards, 7 yards, kept them out of getting into third and longs, but it also wasn't a situation of they had no answer. They had no run stops. They had some run stops in there, but he was worse as a pass rusher than you might think. I mean, against Andrew Wiley, Super Bowl champion for the Chiefs.
A winnable matchup.
A winnable matchup. That's a matchup where if you're a replacement level edge rusher, pass rusher, you should probably win, I don't know, 4, 5 of those reps because they threw the ball 20-something times. You could win 20, I don't know, maybe less than that. But, think of somewhere around there where you would feel him in a game where this was Sam Hubbard from 3 years ago. It just doesn't seem like he's there. Some of it's like they had him in contain a little bit, but then like Jayden Daniels can just outrun him to the edge too. So the contain only, it's just like a spy. Your contain only works if the guy can actually contain him. Otherwise, you're just wasting a pass rusher and you're playing 10 on 11 on with your defense. So I don't think either one was particularly impressive. You want to point to something like, yeah, Joseph Osai got a couple of pass rush wins and Sam Hubbard had a couple of run stops, but really neither one looked like a guy that I'd want as my second or I don't think even my third edge rusher coming on the field.
It's an incomplete performance from those two, just like it was an incomplete performance in this game, but not a whole lot went well on this defense. You can point to the defensive line, and we talked about a couple of guys that had high expectations in Sam Hubbard and Joseph Osai, the reasons that they're not meeting those expectations in week 3. The interior defensive line is a mess. Lawrence Guy comes off the street and plays a solid game. He was fine. Chris Jenkins makes his debut. He was fine. But the guys that are playing a ton of snaps, Jay Tufele and Zach Carter, are just not making impacts, especially as pass rushers. Meanwhile, you got your corners getting beat. You got Geno Stone getting beat deep and Von Bell getting isolated in man coverage. And for the first time this season, really looking like a liability in coverage situations after we talked about why he was on the field in the preview to the game last week. So all that said, you got issues in coverage in the secondary from like all of your starters. Mike Hilton had a good game, but your outside corners, your safeties had issues. Your defensive line looked anemic. What is fixable, would you say, after this game?
I mean, like tackling, right? Second and 21 hitch route. Just you've got a vice on him at for no gain. And a vice just an outside and inside guy. And Dax does force him inside, although he is in no position to actually make a tackle there. He's just kind of running at him, making him go inside. And then Hilton, who I did think had a pretty good game, lets him get inside of him. That's a no-no. But look, there goes Logan Wilson to save the day. No, he wraps around and then takes out Hilton by the legs. Lawrence Guy taps him on the hip, and the guy goes for like 10 yards when they had him dead to rights for no gain, and then at least for like a 2-yard gain. It's just, you have to tackle. And I don't think tackling is coaching, unless you just want to talk about like coaches are supposed to inspire effort. These guys are professional football players. They've been around a long time. Logan Wilson, he's made a ton of tackles in his career. It's just effort and physicality to me. Like you just have, it's more of a want to than anything, or you have to want to go tackle. You have to, be physical, get in there and go make the play. And I know there's times where they're trying to force fumbles or whatever. This wasn't one of those situations. You're in 2nd and 21. You're getting the turnover if you can get them into 3rd and 15. They didn't do that. And that's the thing that I think is most fixable, but it's also been an issue in 2 out of 3 games. where they're not making tackles. I think the defense will look a little better when the defensive tackles get healthier, when Myles Murphy comes back. Maybe they can be at least just a bottom 10 pass rushing unit and not what was this week, probably the worst in the league. I think it'll look a little better. I think the corners coverage will look a little better then. I don't think that, these are all pro level players in the secondary. We're seeing that they're not able to hold up on islands for 4 seconds, but they're fine for the most part. But yeah, just tackling, and maybe when the horses come back, you can at least just be a below average pass rushing unit instead of the league worst without Hendrickson. Those are the two things I look at.
Yeah, I think Jayden Daniels is still at Paycor, just standing there in the pocket. And so he's going to have to listen to us discuss FanDuel coming up. But let's probably hit on the defense a little bit more, Jake. I would imagine tackling is fixable, and then we will get to some good stuff on the offense and what they need to work on coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Maybe you think the Bengals are going to fix their tackling and that they're going to go to Carolina and win their first game of the season. Or maybe you think it's Red Rifle time and Andy Dalton and company, they're going to win their second straight. Regardless of what you think, you need to get to FanDuel right now because you can get a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And you can get started right now with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's it. That's all you have to do. Throw $5 on whatever. It could be Bengals Panthers this week. It could be Thursday night football. It could be any matchup. Maybe you want to look at the baseball slate, even though the Reds, they're way out of it and have just fired their manager. Get in on the action today at FanDuel.com. And again, get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com.
James, you have some other thoughts on this defense before we transition and talk about the progress we saw on offense?
Yeah, I think from a tackling standpoint, I agree with you, Sands. You got to fix that. And that's the thing. If you're going to be a flawed unit, whether it's defensive tackles or as a defense in general, at least handle the little things and do those correctly and be disciplined. And 2nd and 21, that's your opportunity. And it doesn't happen. You get gifted the false starts. You get them in 2nd and long. And they didn't face many 3rd and longs because they were getting chunk plays on 2nd down. And that was a theme, is just the Commanders playing ahead of the chains and converting literally all but one of their 4th down, 3rd or 4th down opportunities on Monday.
And we're back to the same issues that we've seen from this defense in the past as well, where you have guys trying to do more than they're supposed to do on a play, or trying to do someone else's job, or ending up in the same place as other guys. And so it leads you to believe that there are trust issues on this defense again, where not only are there tackling issues, but you're talking about doing the little things. Just do your job, to use Marvin Lewis saying, and be in the place you're supposed to be on the defensive side of the ball. And some of that could go back to coaching, I guess. Like if guys aren't hitting their assignments properly and they're not understanding what they're being asked to do on a play, but more likely to me, it's that they're pressing. Mike, what are your thoughts there before we move on to the offense?
Yeah, it's a fine line because you sometimes you want to give a guy help and maybe reach outside. Maybe that's what Cam Taylor was expecting in those quarters looks where he's thinking Von Bell should just help me here. He's deeper than me. He can get inside on this. But then you take an advantage of in those situations too. Like you're talking about, you end up with 2 guys in the same place on that, and then there's nobody in the spot where he's supposed to be. So really just do your job is probably correct here. I just think, if you're not going to be a good unit, if you're a fundamentally sound unit, you'll at least be okay. Or, it won't be a disaster. But right now, they're not a fundamentally sound unit either, other than the Kansas City game, because whatever reason they get up for that game. But it just appears in 2 out of 3 weeks where they're not fundamentally sound. I could see them doing too much sometimes. I think sometimes it's also just they're not the guys that you might think have a really good feel for offenses so far. They don't seem to be recognizing route distributions very well. I'm thinking of a Logan Wilson play where he's covering grass in the middle of the field. Nobody's near him, and the pass gets completed 5 yards to his left. Move over. There's nobody near you. You don't need to cover the grass. The grass can't catch the ball.
That's hilarious. Sorry, it's just funny. He's like, I'm going to cover this grass better than anyone else has covered grass before. This grass isn't getting open on me. Sorry. I mean, you got to laugh through it, Sans. That's hilarious. Anyways, let's get to the offense. I'm going to cover this grass. Print the shirts.
I can't laugh about it, James. I'm gonna be honest. I'm glad you can. I can't.
It's just like, can you imagine? Like, no one. This grass isn't getting open against me.
Don't come this way.
Don't come.
It can't even grow, guys. It's not even real grass. It's inanimate. It's turf.
It isn't moving. I got this grass locked down.
All right. Let's talk about some things that went well for this team on the offensive side of the ball. They found great success in the run game, the pass game. They blocked well. The scary thing, I guess, man, you got me in a negative mindset now.
No.
Is the Washington defense is actually worse than the Bengals defense potentially. But regardless, the offense for the most part did their job. And they did it in an interesting way, especially early. This is one of the things that was encouraging to me, Mike. They were very versatile in terms of personnel usage, formations. They used a lot of motion early. They took advantage of their plays where they could get their star wide receiver, Jamar Chase, isolated on the outside. A lot of encouraging signs on this offense, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I felt like they're pushing all the right buttons. And I mean, we'll talk about probably everything we can, but I thought the most fun part for me was the run game, where they went back to that influence trap play that they ran with Collins a couple of years ago, where the tackle pulls and whams the nose tackle, and then the guard also and the tackle on the other side flip responsibilities. Tackle goes up, guard kicks that end out, and that was cooking. They also ran a wham play. They ran crunch. They're running some pretty cool gap concepts even after Trent Brown went down. Actually, I think it probably got better when Trent Brown went down, just because they also asked Trent Brown to try to run all the way across the formation at one point to kick a guy out. And I was like, okay, maybe that's a heat check because he didn't get there. But yeah, I think the run game is really cool. I think the personnel use is really fun. It's frustrating that the offense became a fireworks factory, and that's not the lead of the show because of the defense. But I agree. There was a lot of cool stuff, especially early.
Yeah. Joe Burrow obviously put up good numbers. Played well, was in command the whole time. They should have scored on every possession outside of the missed field goal they did. How do you think he played overall looking back? Were there anything that stood out in a negative way, or were you impressed with him?
I was impressed. I think it stopped from being a perfect game because, they ended up scoring the touchdown, but the throw to T. Higgins was a little high. He wasn't able to come down with it with his feet in bounds. You could think of the check down when he was rolling right to the running back that sailed over his head. So it's like a couple of missed opportunities there. But otherwise, it felt like he was in command. It felt like he was making pretty much the best decision possible on every play, checking into things. He was, in charge. He is in charge of changing the pass protection, but there was a couple examples of him sliding the line when he felt pressure coming one way. Maybe those from a hard count. I remember on one play, it was 3rd and long to T. Higgins. Hard count, sees the pressure, adjusts the line, flips the back, hits T. Higgins for a 15-yard gain on like 3rd and 5. That's just great quarterbacking. Although then T. Higgins may or may not have fumbled. They rushed the line and burned 2 plays, so that wasn't great. All the 3 plays after that weren't great. But doing that play was awesome. That's just high-level quarterbacking. And I think Burrow is starting to look like the Joe Burrow we're used to.
Making good decisions, getting into the right plays, getting the ball where it needs to be on time, extending plays when he has to, looking much more comfortable in the pocket. He was only pressured again this week at 29%. He's been pressured 30% or less in pretty much every game this year. But this week, that pressure to sack number 16.7%, which is lower than we've seen from him this year. One of those sacks coming on the play where Trent Brown unfortunately has a patella tendon rupture. That is the diagnosis that we learned about on Tuesday morning. Is he's set to have surgery and will, in fact, miss the season as feared. But overall, encouraging stuff from Burrow, getting to those shot plays where he has the opportunity to push the ball downfield. He pushes the ball downfield. I think he took the alert on a dagger, perhaps, to Mike Gesicki on one play, which is something we talked about as a potential for Mike Gesicki, running that clear out on dagger where they run the clear out vertical and the dig behind it where you very rarely see that go route in the middle of the field thrown. They did take it in this game. That was pretty cool. The dig on Dagger was also open on that play. But Burrow did enough. The offense did enough. And that's what's frustrating. We'll conclude our thoughts on the offense here and other things that we're encouraged about there before we play the blame game to finish up the show and try to figure out who's to blame for this predicament that the Bengals find themselves in at 0-3 coming up next.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Maybe gardening, a new language, maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling, maybe how to stop the Washington Commanders offense from scoring. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. So maybe you're traveling on a short week in between a Monday night game and a Sunday game. Maybe you are just getting back in town, travel for work, or juggling life as a parent. Well, BetterHelp can help you and be flexible with your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Let's conclude our thoughts on the offense here, guys. Any other positives that we should hit on? Jamar Chase had his coming out party for the season. That was nice to see. T. Higgins looked good out there. Yosavash continues to be a red zone weapon. They continue to use a lot of 12 personnel. Anything else stand out to you, James?
Well, they did everything that you could have asked, really. I get it. The red zone stuff is an issue, but it's really not. Offenses aren't going to be perfect. You're going to struggle at times. And by struggle, I mean not get 7 unless, again, you're the Commander. So, no, I don't really have much more. I'm curious to see Amarius Mims. I think the Trent Brown loss is bigger than people realize because he would have been the perfect swing tackle after Amarius ended up becoming the starter anyway. And so to not have that possibility really sucks. Overall, though, I think that this offense has been pretty darn good the past couple of weeks. They're getting better and better, and we'll dive into the Carolina matchup, but they're going to need to continue to play at a high level, I think, if this Bengals team is going to get their first win. Meanwhile, you wanted to play the blame game, Jake, and I think a lot of people are doing that today, specifically on defense. Is it Lou Anarumo? Is it Duke Tobin in the front office? Is it the players? In specifically on defense, where should we put if we're putting together a blame pie, how do we carve up this pie and put the blame on these guys?
Yeah, it's a mix, right? You've got the roster construction on the one hand. You've got perhaps an ability to be a little bit more aggressive at times or put some pressure on Jayden Daniels from the coaching perspective. You've got a 2nd and 14 and goal running play that you call if you're Zach Taylor. You got hurrying the play in to at the end of the first quarter that we talked about, or we didn't talk about yesterday, but that one really bothered me as well. I understand rushing to the line after T. Higgins might have fumbled, but rushing into a play where if you don't absolutely love that look with the first quarter ending, just wait for the first quarter to end and come out of the second quarter and get into something else. So there's a couple things like that on offense. And then on defense, it's tackling, which you can squarely, in my opinion, at this point in week 3, say, like you said, Mike, be professionals about it, doing your responsibilities. But then you get to a roster construction issue where these are clear patterns that we identified in the preseason on the defensive line. And with the departure of DJ Reader, the departure of Jesse Bates a year ago, the talent drain on the defensive side of the ball, despite all of the draft assets they've invested there's a talent issue that is becoming more and more apparent, I think, on this defense. Mike, what are your thoughts as we talk about these different pieces where we can throw blame around?
Yeah. to me, it is just what you get, what you pay for with this defensive line. I know there's injuries, but just you let Reeder walk. Then I guess you could point to Rankins and Hill are out. They're your best two defensive tackles. And then you also got you've got one of your guys out, another guy playing with a club that you drafted. But that is where I would look to, and especially edge rusher too, where we talked a lot about DJ Reeder leaving. And sometimes it's not the guy leaving, but like when Sam Hubbard last year looked a little, not himself, father time's undefeated. It got blamed as an injury, but most of these guys getting old, they lose a step, comes usually with an injury, or there's an injury related to why they lost a step. You think of like Drew Brees' arm is finally cooked when he finally went through another injury. Same with Ben Roethlisberger's arm, but Peyton Manning. Everybody had some injury that ended up sending everything really down the crapper after a couple of glimpses of like, looks like they're kind of hitting the end of their road. So I would say with Sam Hubbard hitting the end of his road, Myles Murphy's on IR, so that's unfortunate. But this team has never gone out and signed some,
Yannick Ngakoue,
Jadeveon Clowney, just any of those guys out there that always sit around right before the season. They could sign them. Same with Lawrence Guy. I mean, really, Lawrence Guy, they could have signed Calais Campbell. They could have signed other guys before that. But, you wait, and then everybody gets who they want, and then you're just left with whatever's out there. So to me, roster construction
maybe Campbell
is kind
and
of my
Guy
biggest issue. Well, yeah,
maybe Campbell and Guy.
Yeah. I don't really understand that. 2021, it felt like this defense really made a lot of sense with DJ Reeder, BJ Hill, and Larry Ogunjobi. And since then, they have never tried to recreate that. They let Ogunjobi walk, and maybe Zach Carter was supposed to be the replacement, but that didn't work. And now Reeder walks, and then you finally get a guy that's like Ogunjobi and Sheldon Rankins, but now you don't have a Reeder. So they've lived in that bare front, and it's been a hallmark of this defense to have those three interior pieces, and then they just never really built it back to what it was in 2021. They were still a good playoff defense in 2022, but yeah, you see the ramifications of letting all these guys walk and think you can replace them, and they haven't been able to.
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough, and that's during all the Jamar conversations. That was part of it too for me. It's like, all right, well, they're obviously not re-signing T. Spoiler, they didn't re-sign Jesse. Like, all right, so pay Jamar early and at least know that you have him, right? And that hasn't happened yet. And while I think something could get done, the frustration there is pretty clear. And when you draft and develop these guys and you get it right, just keep them, because it is hard to keep getting it right and getting it right and getting it right. And we're seeing that now to a degree. Now, can the defense be better? Yeah, tackle better. That alone makes them better. Maybe they do get a stop that was needed on Monday night to win, but they're clearly flawed. Like all year long, there's going to be a theme, Bengals fans, and it's going to be like, yeah, this offense better score. This offense better be efficient. They better take care of the ball. They better produce explosive plays. Like they're going to need to do that in a lot of these games if they're going to have a shot to rebound and win a lot.
I think there's a lot of hopes pinned on Myles Murphy's return because this defense looked good, even you could say, against the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason that it looked like that against the Kansas City Chiefs is that Trey Hendrickson was winning consistently. He had a dominant game against a bad group of left tackles, mostly Kingsley Suamataia and a little bit of Wanya Morris. This week, he should have had that same success, and he didn't. There was actually attention paid to him, as you pointed out, Mike. There were double teams for him this week that he did not see as much against the Chiefs, who, for some reason, almost squandered the game by just refusing to double team Trey Hendrickson against a bad left tackle situation. But when Trey can't win consistently, the warnings that we've issued are there is nothing if Trey isn't winning. We saw that last night. Trey wasn't winning consistently, and there was nothing else. So if Myles Murphy can come back and give you something that approximates an NFL defensive edge defender, which they don't really have outside of Trey right now on a consistent basis, which is very concerning, that could be a huge help and can help to make the rest of this defense look better. It's hard for me to even be too rough on the coverage guys because so often they're being asked to hold up for second, third windows, as we highlighted on the Luke McCaffrey play, for example, or some of the scramble drills where Washington even has guys illegally downfield because they think Jayden Daniels is running, but you can't hold up that long. A lot of that is helped by finding a pass rush and not letting a quarterback hold the ball for 3.5 seconds back there on every play and let all of his guys get into second and third windows. And that's a hard way to live. And yeah, maybe Luke could have done something a little bit differently, found some different buttons to push in this one. But when they have the talent deficiencies they do that you're trying to cover up in the first place, that makes it really hard to call a defense too. And when you can't just rush forward and get literally any pressure throughout a game, again, that's a hard way to try to live as a defensive coordinator. We will need to shift gears here. Go ahead, James.
For sure. It's hard. He's still got to do it. And he's got to figure it out, and he knows that. And so better figure it out, because if you give Andy 3+ seconds, that dude's going to drop some dimes. We saw that. He's still got it.
Andy's seen it all. He's not one of these young bucks you're trying to confuse. Although you can probably confuse Andy Dalton. We know that. We'll see if the Bengals can pull it off as we transition our attention here on Locked On Bengals starting tomorrow to the Bengals Week 4 opponent, Andy Dalton, Part 4. As the Bengals opponent here coming up, we'll have your crossover tomorrow. Then we'll get right into a game preview. Fast week this week. Again, thanks to Mike for contributing his film observations at Bengals_Sans on Twitter. It's always game day in Cincinnati for his podcast. Until next time, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Thanks for listening and have a good one.